The Kiyoshi Okubo Serial Assault and Murder Case 1971. Motivation and preparation for the atrocities. On March 2, 1971, Showa 46, Kiyoshi Okubo, then 36, returned to his home in Takasaki City, Gunma Prefecture, after being paroled, having served a prison sentence of approximately 3 years and 8 months for previous crimes. Although Okubo had vowed to reform and restart his life, his family's attitude was cold. Learning of his family's actions, particularly concerning his estranged wife, he turned his hatred toward the police and prosecutors who had judged him, and the women he victimized. Okubo deemed direct revenge difficult. Instead, he decided that by murdering as many women of a similar age as his victims as possible, he would create a major disturbance in the world. In the mere 70 days between his parole and his arrest, Okubo meticulously prepared for his crimes. He adopted a distinctive outfit, a beret and a rubashka Russian-style shirt. He drove a new white Mazda rotary coupe, covering an average of 170 kilometers a day, running through Gunma Prefecture almost like a taxi. Okubo introduced himself to young women under false pretenses, claiming to be a painter, art teacher, or English teacher. Would you be a model for my painting? If you model for me, I will give you 50,000 yen. My paintings sell for over 300,000 yen each, and I give an extra 100,000 yen when they sell. With these sweet words, he lured the women and drove them away in his car. A spree of violence in just 41 days. Okubo approached 127 women. Of those, he carried out acts of violence against 35 women he took into his car. He then murdered 8 women whom he felt might resist or pose a risk of reporting the crime to the police. The spree of violence occurred over a mere 41 days, starting with the first victim on March 31 and concluding with the 8th victim on May 10. However, the number 8 represents only the cases confirmed by the police. It is speculated that other cases, where victims did not report the crime, may also exist. The concealment of his crimes demonstrated his abnormal obsession and premeditation. When disposing of the bodies of the murdered women, Okubo carried out an extremely clever and meticulous concealment work to make detection difficult. He carefully chose the disposal locations, opting for construction sites where soil would be deeply piled up by excavation work, ensuring the bodies were buried deep underground. This case is often compared to the Yoshio Kadaira serial murder case, in which Kadaira killed 7 women after the war, and was dubbed the second Kadaira incident. While Kadaira killed 7 women over about 14 months, Okubo targeted 8 women in just 41 days. Both shared the method of cleverly manipulating women's psychology to lure them out. The chain of victims and the perpetrator's abnormal behavior. After murdering the first victim, a high school student named Ms. Suda 17 from Tano County, on March 31, 1971, Okubo's spree continued unabated. April 6, Ms. Oikawa 17, a waitress in Takasaki City. April 17, Ms. Ida 19, a temporary government worker in Maebashi City. April 18, Ms. Kawabata 17, a high school student in Isazaki City. April 27, Ms. Sato 16, a high school student in Maebashi City. May 3, Ms. Kawabo 18, an employee of NTT in Isazaki City. May 9, Ms. Takemura 21, a company clerk in Fujioka City. May 10, Ms. Takahashi 21, a housemaid in Maebashi City. Okubo lured the women with clever lies and self-introductions, but if his lies were exposed or if the women mentioned the police or family, he would become enraged, commit acts of violence, and take their lives. For instance, when one woman mentioned, "My older brother is a public prosecutor," Okubo was agitated, thinking, a young woman wouldn't lie, and used the word prosecutor, and cemented his homicidal intent. When another woman suggested the previous encounter would become an incident or mention police-related words like, "My father works at a police box," his abnormal hatred for the police and authority was stimulated, driving him to commit the crime. Specifically on May 3, when murdering the sixth victim, Ms. Kawabo, she pointed out Okubo's prison history, saying, "I hear you just got back." Furthermore, she found a photograph of the third victim, Ms. Ida, in the car and asked, "Tell me where this person lives," which sealed Okubo's homicidal intent. His crimes were not merely for the purpose of sexual violence, but were driven by an extremely self-centered motive, to vent his frustration by obliterating the women, projecting onto them his past grievances and hatred for the police whenever he felt betrayed, investigated, or belittled. Arrest and the decisive role of forensic science. The case came to light following the disappearance of the seventh victim, Ms. Takemura 21. When Ms. Takemura did not return home after the evening of May 9, her brother, Mitsuo Takemura 36, president of Takemura Manufacturing, contacted the police in the early morning of the 10th. Around 6:30 a.m. on the 10th, while Mitsuo desperately continued his search in the city, he found her bicycle abandoned in the parking lot of the Tano Credit Union. Around 9:30 a.m., a man driving a white Mazda rotary coupe approached the bicycle wearing work gloves and began making motions as if to wipe away fingerprints. This man was Kiyoshi Okubo. Mitsuo found this suspicious and called out to him, but Okubo fled, uttering incoherent words. However, Mitsuo accurately memorized the car's license plate, Gun 55 Na 285, and reported it to the police. Police identified Kiyoshi Okubo from the license plate and launched an emergency investigation. With the relentless cooperation of a civilian search team, Okubo was apprehended in Maebashi City around 6:30 p.m. on May 13 and transferred to Fujioka Police Station. In the early morning of the 14th, he was arrested for abduction for indecent assault. Initially, Okubo remained stubbornly silent during interrogation. He repeatedly adopted a defiant attitude, saying, "I am not human. I am a cold-blooded animal with no heart or tears." However, forensic science at the time achieved astonishing results. The laboratory meticulously compared and analyzed approximately 200 hair samples collected with a vacuum cleaner from the white coupe used in the crime against 2,000 hair samples collected by visiting the homes of the known victims. The result proved that the hair found in the car belonged to all 8 female victims. Confronted with this physical evidence, Okubo finally began to confess, 80 days after his arrest. Meticulous forensic investigation became the decisive factor in breaking his cold silence. Final sentencing and execution. Following the incident, Okubo's prison memoir was published, causing a sensation. A psychological evaluation was conducted by specialists at the time, but on February 22, 1973, the Maebashi District Court sentenced Okubo to death. Okubo did not appeal, and the death sentence was finalized. On January 22, 1976 Showa 51, Kiyoshi Okubo's death sentence was carried out at the Tokyo Detention House, an unusually quick execution, only 3 years after the sentence was finalized. He was 41 years old. Records indicate that on the day of the execution, Okubo remained composed even upon hearing the special security unit outside his cell. However, when the security chief stood before him and he finally grasped the situation, his composure broke, revealing intense agitation. This ghastly series of assaults and murders instilled tremendous fear and distrust in Japanese society at the time, particularly within Gunma Prefecture. The aftermath left strange ripples in society, including a sharp decline in sales of Mazda brand cars in the prefecture, vividly etching the terror of latent crime into people's daily lives.